Welcome back to the Josh Kane Presidential Fireside Chat. We're still after it here. We're at episode number 216. We've got, including today, there's only 7 episodes left. So I promise we're almost through this show, The Gilded Age. I'm going to try and get all these episodes out by June 15th. So stay tuned to today's episode and all future episodes to finish out the Gilded Age. Today, we're talking about the late, great Joseph Pulitzer. I don't think you can tell the story of the Gilded Age without the guy that owned the biggest newspaper on the planet, Joseph Pulitzer. So he's the one that documented the Gilded Age in his own fun way, and his life is completely fascinating. Obviously, this show's not nearly enough time to cover everything, but I'm going to tell you the story of Joseph Pulitzer, who was actually born in Hungary in 1847, and he died in 1911. So, fascinating life. Fact is greater than fiction. His life is like almost unbelievable. Again, he's born in Hungary of Jewish descent, and anti-Semitism follows him the rest of his life. He's constantly trying to hide his Jewish descent. But he's attacked by his opponents throughout his life for being Jewish. So he's one of 8 kids, the Pulitzers. Only 2 of them survived childhood. So, I hear a lot about people being anti-vax and anti-vax mandates. Just remember, one of the only reasons you even survived childhood was thanks to vaccine mandates. Anytime anybody complains about it, that's like the first thing I think. It's not like I bring it up. I only bring it up here on this show. Because, listen, I'm not trying to get into fights in public. But it just always makes me laugh when people complain about mandates while not acknowledging that they themselves had to get vaccinated to go to school when they were kids. But in Hungary, he's actually recruited to join the Union Army and fight in the American Civil War. So he actually comes to America in 1864, doesn't speak any English. He does speak multiple languages, French, German, but no English. And, it's one of those situations where the recruiter offers, like, say, $500 for him to come to America. The recruiter pockets most of the money. So he comes to America unable to speak English, basically penniless. And he spends like 18 months fighting in the Union Army. And he's at multiple battles. Like, it's not like he had, mailed it in. He fought for the Americans, never learned English while he was in the Army. Eventually he settles in St. Louis, where there was a large German population. So, he was able to communicate. But he spent much of his free time, what little free time he had, he spent at the public library in St. Louis, and he just taught himself English, which is like so crazy to think about. Just every day learning a little bit more and more English in St. Louis at the library. But he starts working for local journalism in the St. Louis area. Again, he was writing for German papers because he could read and write fluently in German. Again, his big thing, he started going after a lot of the local politicians in St. Louis pretty aggressively, which was at the time kind of unheard of. So, he makes his name in politics, and he actually ends up running for a House of Representatives seat in Missouri. Despite not being old enough, I think the minimum age was 25 and he was like 22 at the time. So he does get elected to the House of Representatives. And while there, he actually gets he has a pretty heated rivalry with another member of St. Louis or Missouri government. And at one point it comes to blows, and Pulitzer actually goes back to his hotel room and gets a gun and shoots the guy. The guy doesn't die, but Pulitzer is arrested. He's tried and found guilty, but he never really serves any time. But once that passes, he actually ends up buying the St. Louis Dispatch and combines it with the Post in 1878. So he builds like this giant newspaper in St. Louis. But for the stolen election of 1876, so initially he's a Republican, but he's an anti-Grant Republican. And when Grant's reelected, he's totally disillusioned with the party. And by 1876, he actually is in full support of Samuel Tilden, travels the country giving speeches in support of the Tilden presidency. And then again, he buys the paper, combines it, and then within 4 years of owning combining the Dispatch and the Post and running the paper, the paper circulation jumps 5 times. So he's like super successful newspaper owner, knows that business very well. And I guess you could say he gets a little bit bored running just the St. Louis paper. And he's already very wealthy man at this point. He's a young guy. In 1883, he actually goes to New York, and he's looking to enter into the New York newspaper line. Now here's kind of a funny story. His only surviving sibling had come to America, followed him to America, and he didn't have a great relationship with his brother Albert. So Albert comes and bounces around a bit. At one point he's teaching English, even though despite, again, he had just learned English. He winds up in New York City before Joseph Pulitzer gets there, and actually starts his own very successful newspaper in New York City. And he's running this paper, and at one point he sort of just gets bored with running the paper, and he decides to retire and sells the paper to William Randolph Hearst. So future episode star of this show, William Hearst, he actually gets his start from Joseph Pulitzer's brother, Albert. Albert, who goes on, he lives this life of leisure in Europe, and he ends up killing himself in Europe. It seems like the Pulitzers, both Albert and Joseph, suffered from some forms of mental illness, and unfortunately for Albert, he ends up actually killing himself in Europe at some point. So when Joseph Pulitzer comes to New York, he's looking to enter into the market. Again, his brother's already running a pretty successful paper, but they had basically no relationship. It's not something that they would even talk to each other about or anything like that. So he's looking for his opportunity, and he finds it buying the New York World paper from Jay Gould, one of the robber barons of the Gilded Age, and he makes a deal and buys the paper. And again, within a few years, he makes the New York World the world's largest paper, increases the circulation of the paper 100 times. It's a hugely successful paper. At one point, Pulitzer's like one of the richest people in America. Again, coming from literally nothing, came to America and fought in the Civil War, not even able to speak English. He certainly had no idea what the war was about, or it was a job to him. And now he's one of the richest people in America, running the largest newspaper in the country. So, and one of his rivals ends up being William Randolph Hearst, fighting for subscribers in New York. But the problem, he actually ends up running in Congress in 1884, and he wins an election for Congress in New York, and he only serves about a year, and he quits it. He hated being in Congress. He preferred working at the newspaper. But in the 1890s, he actually starts to lose his sight in what probably today would be fixed by a simple surgery. But unfortunately, he ends up going basically blind. And again, he's suffering from mental illness. He's only in his early to mid 50s. He's, again, one of the richest people in the country, and he becomes basically a recluse. He lives he's got this huge yacht, and he's traveling back and forth between Europe and America. He's trying to find peace and quiet. He's real sensitive to noise. And it just doesn't work out that well for him. He, eventually just drives himself, I guess, crazy. And he dies doesn't live a very long life, I guess. He dies in 1911. The problem was he never set up a good corporate structure for the newspaper. So eventually the sons take it over. The sons weren't nearly as talented as him. And the paper just kind of disappears. So it went from one of the world's largest newspapers to non-existent shortly after he dies. So I don't know. Kind of sad times, I guess, for the Pulitzers. But in his lifetime, he donates millions of dollars to Columbia University to start like a journalism school. At that point, there really wasn't like you weren't training journalists. So he makes a huge donation, and in his will, he leaves even more money to the school, who eventually, after his death, formed the Pulitzer Prize. That's based on his donation. So he wasn't necessarily a great guy. He was a really terrible boss, hard to work for, especially once he went blind. He was very difficult to work with. But again, the Pulitzer Prize comes from his donation to the school, the Columbia University. So fascinating guy. I mean, can you imagine? Guy comes to America, recruited to fight in the Civil War in a country he knew almost nothing about, didn't speak the language. Again, even after serving 18 months in the war, didn't know how to speak a lick of English. So, then goes on to become one of the wealthiest people in the country, and honestly, one of the most powerful, right? Because he was running one of the most powerful papers in the country. So I can't say enough of how fascinating the guy was. I've got great book recommendations today. This is the straight-up biography on Joseph Pulitzer. It is excellent. I couldn't put it down. The guy's life is endlessly fascinating. Just terrific, terrific book. I highly recommend it. All right. So I'm no longer reading any new books on the Gilded Age. I wanted to take a break. So I've finished all the books I'm willing to read. There's certainly people I missed, not on purpose, just Sitting Bull really haunts me. I really should have read a book on Sitting Bull. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I could read read a Sitting Bull book. And you're probably right. And maybe I will, but not right now. So I've gone, I had like a stack of like 30, I'll loosely called as current event books. And if I read some good ones, I'll try and slip them in here and there in these last couple episodes. Well, I read these 2 books last week, and I can't stop thinking about them. They've completely changed how I view the world. In fact, if I had read these books before starting this show, I would have never done this show. That's how impactful I think about these books every day since I finished both of them last week. They're really good. And they're going to be controversial. And you may see yourself in some of these books. You're definitely going to see people you know. The first one, The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols. He's an old New England curmudgeon, which I love. When I was growing up, all I ever wanted to be was an old New England salty sea captain. I never went to sea, but this pandemic has sped up my curmudgeonness. I couldn't be happier about it. I just need like white eyebrows and maybe a pipe. Otherwise, I am an old salty sea captain for sure. Well, this book is going to help you get there. He tells it like it is. Again, there's going to be stuff in here you're not going to like to hear. And his second book, Our Own Worst Enemy. I feel like every American should read these 2 books. That's how powerful I think these are. You're not going to like what you see, especially some of you. You definitely need to read it. TV recommendation. I know the Ben Franklin documentary on PBS just recently aired by Ken Burns. That was terrific. It's 4 hours. It could have been 40 hours. It was awesome. I forget how much I liked Ben Franklin. I still have John Adams as my overall favorite founding father, but Ben Franklin's definitely my number 2. And then Hamilton and Washington and Jefferson can fight over 3, 4, and 5. Travel recommendations. Some of you know that I recently took employee 0002 on a road trip. That leaves open that there might be 9,000 employees at this company, the Josh Kane Presidential Fireside Chat. But we went on a road trip that we were supposed to do in the fall. We went to the Johnstown Flood. Can't recommend it enough. It was terrific to see and learn and be on the ground, see the dam where it broke, go to the town to see where, the town that it flooded. Nearby is the Flight 93 Memorial, which was just moving. if you ever get a chance to be in Western Pennsylvania, definitely do that. And then as part of that road trip, we went and saw McKinley's, where he was shot, where Teddy Roosevelt was inaugurated. So we did a lot in only a couple of days, maybe too much for all involved, but it was well worth it. Well, that's it for Joseph Pulitzer. I'm Josh Kane with the Josh Kane Presidential Fireside Chat. Bye for now.